Hello, I'm Morris Ruddick. We've been talking about Jewish business secrets. Throughout the business world, people are seeking the formula for the creative. Smart people are trying to discern the steps and advantages to success. Yet for centuries, the greatest creative exploits consistently have been from the Jews. Jews are a culture that thinks differently. It all began with Abraham, who risked shaping his destiny based on God's guidance. Abraham's son Isaac astounded surrounding societies because he grew a harvest of crops when famine prevailed for everyone else. The advantage came from hearing and obeying God. Joseph, with no status or position, influenced his host culture by means of his prophetic gift. He accurately interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, anticipated and prepared for a time of crisis, and in so doing averted disaster. Moses then outlined the principles and practices that set the stage and advantage for the future. The books of Moses have defined the culture and determined how a people whose identity is entwined with God think and then act. Jesus came and raised the bar. Jesus released the fullness of the advantage entrusted to the descendants of Abraham. It was as if he had turned the mix of an emerging motorbike economy laced with a top-down, heavy floundering accelerator system of high-stakes investments into a cultural advantage that would change everything in its path. The advantage begins with mindsets. Thinking like Jews begins with their identity being in God. Jews hold to the belief of being a prophetic people of God, whose ways reflect the pattern of their forefather Abraham, to be blessed, to be a blessing. For the most part, Jews have resisted assimilation, and from age to age, they have maintained their unique identity culturally. Jewish beliefs nurture the dynamic of community as much or more than any other culture, but with the approach of being a trust society. They foster entrepreneurship and creativity from within, and they build incisively from the bottom up. Within this context, community-wise, when adhering to their standards, the Jewish people operate in a self-regulated self-sufficiency within their communities. They nurture the type of stewardship that serves and reflects excellence. The Jewish brand of leadership has the distinction of operating best through influence and service. Having frequently been a conquered people, Jews have learned the secrets of being a culture within a culture. Yet as a people, they uphold the ways to not only survive, but to thrive. Their influence has established middle classes in societies without a middle class. Jews have shaped the positive aspects governmentally, socially, judicially, economically, and morally of what has become known as Western civilization. Yet, they are at their root an Eastern culture. Jews are disciplined and are willing to pay the cost to live for this higher standard, to sacrifice for the future of their people. Jews nurture and develop the next generation to hold to the secrets and standards that have been distinctive to them as a people. Jews are a moral society. Their distinctive identity upholds and passes on high standards of community, entrepreneurship, innovation, excellence, and industriousness that also happen to be central to many Asian cultures. So each of these unique cultural standards have blended together to form a people who both train their children and operate in community as a people who think differently. This different way of thinking releases creativity. This different way of thinking, this advantage, has resulted over the centuries in Jews being known as the people of business. And Jesus came and released steroids into the Jewish advantage. The Jewish mindset begins with vision. When God called Abraham, he told Abraham to look at the stars of the heavens. Then he told Abraham that his descendants would be more than he could see in terms of those stars. God was releasing vision within Abraham. Then there's a factor of looking closely at the steps to be taken. This has special bearing in business dealings and when evaluating opportunity. It is an investigative way of evaluating matters. It involves asking a lot of questions and doing good research. There is a proverb that says that the naive believe anything, but the prudent is cautious and considers well his steps. That means doing your homework. It means giving careful consideration to whatever you're about to get involved in. Then there comes the imagination. Jesus had a lot to say about the power of our imaginations. He indicated that if we got really angry, to be careful, because that anger doesn't entertain murder in our minds. Jesus is pointing to the connection between the seen world and the unseen world. Jesus was continually showing his followers how to close the gap between the natural and the spiritual. The imagination and faith work hand in hand. One of my favorite stories of how creative thinking and faith should work together involves a company today known as the Williams Companies. During their early years, this firm was producing roughly $10 million annually in revenues. At its helm were two brothers, Joe and John Williams. The Williams brothers decided to grow their company by acquisition. In doing so, they put in a bid to purchase Great Lakes Pipeline, a company that had more than 10 times their own annual revenues. Not only did they acquire this company, they made the new operation successful. But at the time they made the acquisition, the Wall Street Journal had a front page article titled, "The Minnow Swallows the Whale." A minnow, one of the smallest of all fish, swallowing a whale is a good portrayal of this different way of thinking. It is out of the box. It is faith in operation. It is good Jewish thinking. These three factors, vision and research, combined with using your imagination with faith, then become the foundation for good planning. Planning is mapping out steps for the future. It involves setting goals, then developing short-term strategies in order to accomplish these goals. Steve Jobs created a company with a culture of creativity. Steve Jobs wasn't Jewish, but entrepreneurially, he thought like a Jew. It is the reason Jews are known as a people of business. Jews are entrepreneurial in their way of thinking. Genuine entrepreneurs have a different way of viewing things than those whose mindsets are institutional. Jewish business thinking is more bottom-up in its focus. For years, Western university business programs have approached their training from a top-down stance, preparing students for the world of the accelerated programs of the venture capital world and for fast growth startups. It has had its focus on large institutions while unfortunately overlooking the entrepreneurial approach to startups, which most of the big companies have grown from. Today there's a shift within many universities as they discover the creative benefits of entrepreneurial thinking. The focus of the entrepreneur is on the customer, an employee, versus the focus of the institutional thinker that tends to be on the organization. Entrepreneurial structure is more flexible compared to the tighter more controlling ways of the institution. Innovation for the entrepreneur is to apply faith in managing risk versus the institutional thinker's approach of attempting to minimize risk. The ability of the entrepreneur is to embrace change rather than that of the institutional person who is inclined to maintain the status quo. The output sought by the entrepreneur is market creation. For the institutional thinker, it's market share. The entrepreneurial leadership style nurtures and motivates, rather than the institutional person's tendency to micromanage. The real product sought by the entrepreneur is a dream, versus simply the products or services offered by the institutional thinker. Finally, the motivation of the one who thinks like an entrepreneur is to make history, compared to the motivation of the institutional thinker, which is to make money. Steve Jobs established an entrepreneurial culture. The entrepreneurial culture fosters creativity. General Electric, or GE, had become a lumbering giant and very institutional. Profits were down and their stock prices way down. The board brought in a new CEO who thought differently. Jack Welch thought like an entrepreneur. He began changing policy and establishing the motivation for an entrepreneurial climate and culture. He removed those whose thinking stymied opportunity. General Electric, or GE, was revived with its vitality restored. And this is Morris Ruddick, and I look forward to our next session together.